Hola, all you little theologians out there. Let's stop playing games on our tablets and listen up. This is Mr. Johnson with the first installment of the Theology Videos series. If you've been thinking that up until this point all Jews are the same, then boy are you wrong. We've seen many different types of Jews, from priests to prophets to kings to patriarchs to judges to scribes, etc. And even Jews these days interpret the law in keeping kosher in many different ways. But what about during the first century? What kind of Jews were there during that time, during the time of Jesus? What about regular Jews? Were there regular Jews? The reality is that the first century Jewish groups are very much like your own high school cafeteria with mean girls and jocks and punks and band kids and all kinds of different Jews, just like there are all different kinds of people. First century Jews were just as diverse. We'll be looking at several different types of groups. And we have to remember that people could change their stripes, and these criteria are not necessarily hard and fast or complete classifications. There were 5 different political and religious groups during the time of Jesus. You have Romans, Sadducees, Pharisees, Essenes, and Zealots were your 5 main political religious groups. These are important groups, and we're going to go through each one of them individually. First, you have your Romans. Obviously, they're not Jews, and they're not going to believe in God. They're not going to be inclined to follow Jesus immediately. And just a couple factors about them that you might want to take in consideration. The Romans were in control, and they utilized several different governors. For instance, you have the Roman procurator, uh, Pontius Pilate, and you'll learn more about the political situation later on. But just know that Rome's in charge, and they really want peace, and that's very important for the Jews, but also important for the Romans, and so they're going to work together to try to find peace. Now, our first really important Jewish group is called the Sadducees, and the Sadducees were very much concerned with temple. They were centered in Jerusalem. They were mostly rich, priestly, and aristocratic class. They're going to work with the Romans to kind of remain in power. The Sadducees are very important in terms of the Sanhedrin, which is the major lawmaking body and Supreme Court of Judaism. We're going to hear about them because they're going to be the ones that are going to sentence Jesus to die and ultimately kick that decision over to Pontius Pilate, the Roman procurator. They're very much concerned with temple sacrifice. The law is important, but temple sacrifice and the apparatus of the temple and the money making that the temple provides is very, very important to the Sadducees. Our next Jewish group, and here's a little picture of the Sadducees. Notice their distinct garb. And on the previous slide, you could see the high priest is a Sadducee, and he is dressed up just like one. Our next religious group are known as the Pharisees. Now, you're probably familiar with this group because you've heard them jockeying with Jesus from time to time. The word Pharisee literally means separated one in Hebrew, and it refers to the fact that they are very strict observers of the law and tradition, and they have hyper strict observance of the law. The law is all it's about. When the temple is destroyed and the Sadducees are no more, Pharisees are going to be the ones that the first century Jews really come to emulate, and previous Jewish groups will also follow them as well. They're mostly middle class, and they're not very concerned with Gentiles or the Romans. They're going to accept the prophets as inspired and also the law, and they're going to rely very heavily on oral tradition. Pharisaic teachers would go around and explain what the law was, and the best equivalent we have is that they are modern day lawyers. Now here's a picture of Pharisees. You can tell they're a little more reserved than your Sadducees. The next group are the Essenes. The Essenes are your garden variety apocalyptic group. They believe that God is coming, but it's coming through a catastrophic end time event. There's not going to be a strong emphasis on a Messiah. They're going to live very strict lives. They're going to hide their writings away in seaside caves like the Dead Sea Scrolls, and they're going to live very austere lives. It means no luxuries, no riches or wealth. They're a very communal group. Some believe that John the Baptist might have been influenced by the Essenes because they take a big influence on ritual washings, and obviously baptism might have some roots in these Essene beliefs. The Dead Sea Scrolls come to us because the Essenes were able to save these documents, and very important religious group for us. They also are going to live apart, and ritual purification is very important for salvation. Here's a picture of an Essene cave. Moving on to our last and final group, the modern day zealots, freedom fighters, and terrorists. You can see some verses here that are going to explain to you what exactly the zealots are all about. And ultimately, it's all about fighting the Romans, bringing back King David 2.0. Huge difference from the Essenes are going to separate themselves from society. The Zealots are going to be right there in society, using revolutionary political action to try to overthrow the Romans. Now, some believe that Simon, one of the apostles of Jesus, might have been a zealot, as it is listed in Luke chapter 6, verse 15. Now, you can understand with this huge influence on violence and a political messiah and David 2.0 that you might get Rambo Jesus. And many Jews had this mentality that Jesus had to have been this political messiah, and that's why we rejected him, because of his peaceful beliefs. Now, the two big groups that you want to make sure you keep track of are Pharisees versus Sadducees. Pharisees have the law, Sadducees have the temple. Pharisees interpret the Torah, Sadducees say, just the Torah, just the law. Pharisees are middle class, Sadducees upper class. Pharisees are going to believe in the resurrection of the dead, that at the last day that our bodies will be raised to heaven. They're going to believe in the afterlife, whereas the Sadducees are not really going to believe in an afterlife. The Pharisees are going to reject the Jewish leaders, and the Sadducees are the Jewish leaders, and so they're going to keep and work with the Romans to support the current political group. Now, there are other groups that are running around Israel at this time. You've got scribes who are concerned with interpreting the law and writing down the scriptures. You've got your Herodians, who are, basically mafioso types. You'll learn more about that during the political situation video of first century Israel. You've got followers of John the Baptist who believe that John the Baptist was the Messiah. And then you've also got your dispossessed. Many common Jews are going to dislike the Sadducees in power. They're going to dislike the rigorousness of the Pharisees, the strangeness of the Essenes. They're going to most closely identify with the Zealots, who are willing to fight. And this is why many people shouted to free Barabbas, the revolutionary, over Jesus. Ultimately, those are your first century Jewish groups. Thanks for listening. Feel free to watch this video again, and you may need to take some notes on it to make sure that you are ready for any open note quizzes in class. Thank you.